welcoming Steven Friedlander.
Good morning. Remember these?
Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
I still have one.
This is LinkedIn 1983. Sam asked me to talk about marketing and communications for your books for about 15 or 20 minutes. So that's what I'm going to do. And in part, I want to focus initially on connections and about how having a smart strategy based on connections built upon a foundation of thoughtful branding and positioning can make all the difference when thinking about how to promote your books. I must use the word connections 10 times per class evening during my semester-long magazine industry workshop at UT because at its core, being a successful writer, I think, is about two things. First, you got to have the goods. You got to be good. And second, you have to be engaged through relationships and connections. Although, as an aside, I would advise you never to use the word connections for your newsletter, your book, or your project. And here's why. This is a package of projects titled Connections. Connections. This is a high school in Riverdale, in New York. Connections, the quarterly magazine for people going places, published by the American Express card. Connections, well, there's an interesting one, the complimentary magazine of Sea Link British ferries. The Connection, he has risen. This was for mature Catholics. Connections with Eva Longoria. I don't even know what this is, with Jay Shetty about spirituality. It goes on and on. Connections, the quarterly newsletter for U.S. cellular customers, and on and on. Don't use connections. However, connections can mean many things. During my magazine class, I discuss cultural connections all the time. For example, how Dave Chappelle owes his brand of humor to Richard Pryor and Lenny Bruce. How Larry David is a combination of Woody Allen and George Carlin. I think if I want to write, and write well, and write critically and compellingly, and capture my audience's attention and interests, and an editor's interests, I have to be able to make intellectual connections and cultural connections. I think it's similar as we talk about personal and professional connections and how that relates to communications and marketing, our work in 2023. When I was 10 in 5th grade, 11 in 6th grade, my best friend was Eliot Spitzer. Eliot Spitzer was, for those of you who don't know, the Attorney General of New York State in the early 2000s. He was known as the Sheriff of Wall Street. He went after investment bankers and banks who were cheating the system. Eliot was later elected governor in 2006. And then, and whom the gods would destroy, they make all powerful. That's from Sophocles. In 2008, Spitzer resigned as governor after a scandal broke concerning Eliot's involvement with prostitutes. You can learn more, by the way, in a very strong documentary titled Client 9, The Rise and Fall of Eliot Spitzer. I recommend the documentary. It's directed by an outstanding documentarian, Alex Gibney, based on a book by Peter Elkind, who, by the way, was a grade ahead of me in high school. More background. You have probably read a story about a woman who was walking in Manhattan a couple of years ago when a falling brick from a New York City building fell, hit her, and killed her. And her name was Erica Lindenbaum. And yes, she was a high school classmate of mine. I used to go to parties at her Upper East Side New York apartment. And of course, Elliot and Erica were classmates at Princeton. Now, why do I tell you all of this? We can discuss all day whether Elliot's phenomenally bad judgment and appalling hypocrisy were the result of either extraordinary hubris or a willful need for self-destruction. But I was talking to Elliot a few weeks ago for a project I am currently working on. And we were talking about Erica and the various people we know collectively, which I will term our mutual friend group. Look around this room. Everyone in this room is a friend and someone who can help promote your book. Work connections, colleague connections matter. I got my first 6 or 7 jobs, full-time and freelance, all from people I met on my first magazine job, which was called Home Video, when the video world was first starting and the cable industry was first starting. I wrote about VCRs and Beta versus VHS. And I am still in touch with many of those editors and writers, all from my first gig. And that was a long time ago. And by the way, not a day goes by, not a day, when I don't speak to someone with whom I worked at Whittle. And I haven't worked at Whittle Communications in 30 years. This week alone, a former Whittle intern of mine from 1989, with whom I have been in touch for the decades that have passed, asked me to write a recommendation. And now we're talking about doing a podcast. So you never know. A professor at UT asked me to write a recommendation for her, for a grant that she is pursuing. A college student at UT Chattanooga, who I have known since she was that tall, called me and asked me to help her with a book that she is working on. I bought some artwork from a wonderful artist who was a classmate of my daughter's in high school. Your work and your friendships through the years can connect you to different generations, both personal and professional. And it's so important to try to leverage those relationships across generations. You forget how many people you know. I often have former students speak to my class about the production of Scoop, which is a magazine that we produce, and also their experiences after college and in the working world. I recently had a former UT journalism major and a City View intern of mine speak about her experiences in Knoxville and in Nashville, where she is now a director at the Tennessee Department of Education. And oh, by the way, when she needed to hire someone, she asked me if I knew anyone. And yes, I did. Someone who had taken my class twice. And with my recommendation, she got the job, and she now works at the Tennessee Department of Education. It's a very tidy circle. All of these people stay in touch with me, and I stay in touch with them. We have developed professional relationships that are mutually beneficial. My essential point here, point number 1, is that we sometimes really forget all of the people that we know and all of the people who can help us promote our work and our projects. Even if they can't help directly, they might know someone, or might know someone who knows someone, who can help with marketing and communications and just get the word out. Now, I believe you have to be prepared for those interactions. Who are you? How does what you do and what you say reflect who you are? All of this is relevant as you think about promoting your books. So, essential point 2A is have that elevator speech ready. Who you are and what is your book about? These seem like very simple questions, but you'd be surprised at how many people can't answer that question. We refer to those answers as the elevator speech, and I insist at the beginning of each of my classes that my students work and prepare answers. Why is that important? For example, there was a football coach named Matt Rule. He was the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, and he went to the camps where seniors in college would go to show their wares before the NFL draft. And as Rule tells the story, he got on an elevator. This is an elevator story about an elevator. He got on an elevator and he said to the kid, "Who are you? Why are you here?" And the kid couldn't answer. The kid mumbled a few things. And Rule said, "I didn't draft him." This kid lost millions of dollars, because he could not answer that question. Which brings me to essential point 2B, which is about personal branding and positioning. Positioning is who you are and what you exist to do. Branding is how you choose to label the product or magazine or company or book, or you. So in simple terms, you can't really brand until you position. Think of positioning as a mission. What are you and the book trying to do? For the purpose of this discussion, a good positioning conveys an overall message and an overall mission. Good positioning is part of your elevator speech, the way you characterize yourself to the outside world and how it relates to the book you are selling. In practical terms, for example, this group could pitch a weekly segment on one of the local Live at 5 or Live at 5 at 4 programs. Imagine a weekly or bi-weekly Tennessee Authors Guild segment in which an author appears and talks about his or her work. But remember, TV producers are busy. And so the pitch has to convey succinctly, with some passion, the overall mission of the group and specific info about 2 or 3 authors and the purpose and overview of those books. And as an aside, it doesn't matter if only 10 people watch Live at 5 and see you, because you have a clip for your website which is valuable, and that clip lives forever. The same goes, for example, point number 4, for something like Union Books. I don't know how many of you know Flossie, who worked at Davis Kidd for so many years, then later opened Union Books. She hosts readings and book launches all the time. So how can this group, both collectively and individually, tell the elevator tale? Positioning also matters if you want to write for outlets that can help you continue to get your name out. For example, did you know that UT publishes a lot of publications? These are some scoops, if anybody wants to see the magazine my group does. But just so you all know, all of these magazines are published by UT. And you could be writing for them and getting the word out about things. This is called Accolades. It's published by the College of Education, Health, and Human Sciences. This is the Haslam magazine. This is obviously the business magazine, named after Mr. Haslam, or all of the Haslams. Land, Life, and Science. The University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture publishes this. So I don't know what everybody's interests are here, This is called Noteworthy. It's published by the School of Music. This is the System magazine. I think it's quarterly. It's called Our Tennessee.
How do you find out about these titles? What would you look? University of Tennessee magazines?
Yeah, just ask me, because I know. This is put out by the engineering department called Tennessee Engineering. This is put out by the law school. It's called Tennessee Law. This is Torchbearer. This is the one put out by, I think, UT, here, UTK. All of these are potential outlets for you, certainly to get the word out about what you're doing. More importantly, if you start writing, they know you, and when your book is published, maybe they want to do a feature on you. Certainly, if you went to UT or a part of the system, they always are interested in interesting people. So please keep all of that in mind. Now, you'll notice I have yet to talk about apps or platforms such as Instagram or TikTok or even Facebook. Or there's something now called Threads, which started last night and already has 100 million people because, of course, it's connected to Instagram. We all started out on typewriters. Nothing was more thrilling for me when I was working at my first national magazine to be seated at a desk with an electric, self-correcting IBM Selectric typewriter. And I thought, my production is going to go through the roof. And sure enough, I did work faster. But the new typewriter, it's just like apps and social media today. Those are tools. I speak to my class and I think all the time about having and executing a plan. Plans can change, but it's very important to have a roadmap. So, point 6, which ties into what I've been talking about. When you are thinking about how to sell your book and how to market your book to various audiences, I believe you must ask yourself these questions. And by the way, these are questions that potential editors who might feature a review or excerpt about your book or a producer at a TV program will ask. I think to accompany the elevator speech, it's good to have these answers handy. Why is there a need for this book? Why are you the person to write this book? How is your book different? And are there specific audiences you are trying to reach? Have answers to these questions handy. So, the social media discussion. I do believe you need a website, but it can be a one-page landing page that has a bio and a photo and how you can buy the book, whether through Amazon or through you if you don't place on Amazon. As for Instagram and Facebook and other social media platforms, my answer is maybe. These platforms are typewriters. And if you employ some of the other options we have talked about, then don't worry about Instagram and Facebook. Social media should be fun, not a chore, and I don't really think an Instagram presence is a necessity. By the way, if you want to use social media, you don't have to be the ones doing it. There are plenty of people born after 1995 who can do the work for small fees. Sometimes it's worth it, sometimes not. But you don't need to be intimidated, and you can hire people to do the work. So my advice to everyone is with a little planning and some effort related to what you know and who you know, you can market your books successfully. Thank you. I'm happy happy to answer any questions if anybody has questions about marketing and communications.
What are your feelings about book contests or trying to pursue getting awards that you can then advertise?
I sort of go back and forth on those. I do think contests can be fun. For instance, I enter a couple for my students because I think when you're younger, it's kind of fun to win an award. I'm not sure it really helps sales much. And they can be expensive if you enter a lot of them. So I'm not sure they're really all that valuable.
On employing students or whoever, do we do that? How do we find these students? You know, so few of them have gray hair.
Well, if you don't know people, you can always just contact me. I mean, I'm happy to put you in touch with people who can, who can do this sort of work.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Steve. Good to see you. Thanks so much for coming.
Sure.
As you were talking about keeping in touch with the web of people that you know for decades, and I do that too, I've embedded time on social media into my life just because it's I get to know who has a new grandchild or who's up to what. So I'm wondering how many of us here in the room have, I don't know how else anybody connects like you have, or like I have, without having already, for me it happens to be Facebook and LinkedIn.
Facebook is still, for those of us, let's say over 50, Facebook is still a place where people go. So that's not a bad place. But frankly, I make it part of my life to reach out to people. I email my friends. I mean, that's all it takes. Remember, we used to use telephones. People, again, under 30 don't. But emailing people, hey, how are you? Frankly, is not a bad way to begin to re-engage the circle of friends that you have. I think that's a great way to do it. And it's not about, oh, I'm going to have a book published soon. I need to stay in touch with people. We should be doing this because we're alive. And then it becomes a natural part of our marketing when that time comes.
You're drawing a distinction there between that and what you said about contacting the place you used to go to college and saying, I'm
Yes.
an alumnus, excuse me, and I happen to be wrapping up this series. Those are two distinct things, correct?
Absolutely, but where did you go to college?
Undergraduate at UT, and then Tusculum, and
It was so long
somewhere else.
Right, well, you should contact UT, contact the editors of Torchbearer, for example, let them know you've published a book. You never know when they might want to do something. There's just so much going on at UT that people don't know about. There's a lot of media. And these are just the magazines. Each of the individual schools and departments often have their own media that are not magazines, they're just putting things out online. A digital article can be just as valuable. So there are all sorts of ways through your universities to let them know you've published a book.
Thanks.
Just as a for instance, I graduated from Tech. Sorry, I'm an outcast from UT. But I sent a note to my alumni association. They put a nice little blurb in our monthly online, and I know I got sales because I got Amazon reviews. So, and it doesn't take much. And, you compare Tennessee Tech to UT, it's just a little fish in a big pond.
I think that's right. I think also one thing that is just, I'm reminded of, if you read something that you like, contact the author and let them know you like it. I read stuff online, of course, every day, and it's not hard to find people. It's not hard to find the email of the writer, particularly if it's a magazine or just any sort of digital media. And I thank them if I've enjoyed the article. And I let them know, you kept me reading for 15 minutes. That's pretty good. I cannot tell you how many times I have received as a response, you have made my day. That's why we write. I will never forget. I was on the subway in New York. This was in the late 80s. And someone was reading an article I had written. I had chills. I was so thrilled. We write because we want people to read and respond to our work. So reaching out to someone who has read your, whose work you like, you've made a new friend. And if you have 10 of those friends, when the book comes out, let them know. You never know who they're writing for or how they might want to help you. In general, I have found, particularly in the editor and writer community, we tend to be pretty nice people. And people want to help you. Keep that in mind. Hi.
So do you have any ideas on trying to reach out to like celebrities or famous comedians? Because every chapter of my book I've quoted like my favorite comedian, like the Over, Ellen, all those, but I'm having a hard time trying to find either their fan club or I just sent a book, but then sometimes that closes, the post office closes or whatever. So,
Right. That's
so
a
do you have
little,
any ideas
it's a
about
little
that?
trickier.
Yeah, because what I've been doing is taking it and I'll put their, like a little sticker on them and say, like today's Kevin Hart. You know who Kevin Hart is?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Claim to Fame is I made him laugh and he's in my number 5. So I tried to send a book to him and with a little note that says, hey, I made you laugh. But it's hard to find those addresses because they don't want to be found, obviously.
Yes, that's a little trickier. There is a resource called Rocket Reach. It's generally for writers and editors, that sort of thing. But every once in a while, you can find a celebrity's email, now not an address. Addresses are very tough, but you can find an email that way. Rocket Reach, and I think you can do 3 or 4 of those for free every month. You can also sign up. But I've used it, and it has been, it can help. Yeah.
Well, and Homer Hickman, you know who Homer Hickman is that wrote the Rocket Boys and all
Yeah,
those
yeah.
guys? Well, I finally found him, because when you're an unpublished, no-name author, nobody else wants to give you a word. So he told me no 3 times, but the 4th time, I went back and said, hey, because I had met him, and he said, aim high. I said, well, how can I aim high if nobody's going to give you a chance? And then he did give me, he gave me like my best endorsement ever.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's.
Yeah. It's a little trickier.
It is, because he says, I don't want to, nobody wants to give you an endorsement because they don't know what the book's about in case it's whatever, whatever.
Any other questions?
Hi. I always think about the writing world because it's, been part of my career all along. And I think it's gone back and forth occasionally. I'd like your response to this. From competitive, excessively competitive, to where people don't even share, to that really wonderful experience of the collegiality of writing and writing groups and things like that. Do you see that same pattern? Did you see that same pattern anywhere in your career? Because I think it makes the difference between doing the sorts of things that you're suggesting and the idea of closing oneself off and really never giving themselves the opportunity.
Yeah, I think if I understand your question, in the workplace, people can be very competitive.
Yes.
Whittle, for example, was an extraordinarily competitive place, and people weren't always the nicest. However, I have found in the writing community, people are far more giving. Writers who write want to help.
Right.
For my class, I have reached out to really interesting writers and just said, hey, would you zoom into my class? 9 times out of 10, they will do it because it's just, that's what we do.
Right.
And that's what we want to do to reach people. So I think in general, I have found the community to be pretty collegial.
Yeah, I have too.
Yeah.
But 2 or 3 times, I'd say, just on a timeline, I've seen it go off a little bit.
Yeah.
And then.
And when that happens, you just dismiss it and move on.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.